Happy New Year, Hoosier Nation. It's 2024, and your Indiana Hoosiers are in the college football playoff national championship. Michael Penix and Kalen DeBoer. Wait, what? All right, it's Washington. All right, you get it. But
Here, I'm all ready for next week's game.
there you go. Matt's got his merch. Nick Sheridan, Bill Inge, the Washington Huskies are beating Michigan. We're not even entertaining that conversation. But this podcast will be focused on IU's men's basketball team. The Hoosiers get through non-conference play without a bad loss. They take care of business against Morehead State, North Alabama, Kennesaw State, and now 18 games of Big Ten play before the conference tournament. Matt and I are going to give our assessment of where this team is at. Frankly, folks, this is kind of a tipping point week. There's no crisis exactly like there was last year, but this is kind of a defining week for IU men's basketball in the context of the season. We're going to talk about why this week is so big, preview a road game at Nebraska on Wednesday night, a home game against Ohio State, and so much more here on episode 319 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ, recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024, where I am your host, Nithin Christian. Here with me tonight is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, IU's 10-3, 2-0 in Big Ten play, of course, back to those wins against Maryland and Michigan. The analytics hate this team, but the Hoosiers have avoided an awful loss, even though there were about 4 or 5 close calls. I don't know what you think about this team. I'm curious to hear what you have to say, but make no mistake about it, you have 2 massive Big Ten matchups coming up over the next 5 days.
Yep, massive is the correct word for that, and analysts can suck my left toe. Respectfully, I mean, all that matters is you win games, and IU has been winning games, albeit not against ranked teams or the top tier opponents, but against the teams that they're supposed to be beating, they are beating no matter how hard it's looked.
Yeah.
And it has looked hard. They are beating those teams. Now, I would like to point out that I think Indiana really matches up well against a lot of other Big Ten teams. Not a lot of teams in the conference are shooting all that well from three. Not a lot of teams in the conference are all that good at rebounding or getting out in transition. Honestly, there's not a lot of really good basketball teams in the conference. I'm going to be honest with you. It goes Purdue. Rough. It goes Purdue. large jump down, Illinois. Even larger jump down, Wisconsin, maybe. And then everybody else, in my opinion. And Ohio State. Wisconsin, Ohio State, you could probably put in that same tier, but then it's everybody else.
And by the way, Terrence Shannon Jr. is suspended.
We will not be seeing him play another game for Illinois. I would be surprised.
Right? I think you and I, Matt, have said, hey, if there's one guy we'd want on this Indiana team the last couple of years, it was him. And yikes.
Yikes is right. I mean, you see some of the Michigan counts being like, this is the best thing admissions has ever done, which is honestly, kind of true.
And hold on, my shit froze. All
right. Affiliated stuff all the time on Twitter. But yeah, I think I was talking to him and I was like, look, either way, this is a terrible situation for Terrence Shannon Jr. You have either he did what he did, right? And he ruined that girl's life. And he honestly ruined his life as well, doing something really stupid that he probably could have just done if he had just been courteous and nice and followed all the correct steps that they teach you in college when you do, orientation. Or B, she just ruined his life for virtually no reason, and ruined Illinois' season. I to be an Illinois fan right now, that is a sticky situation I don't want to be involved in at all. And it's terrible all around.
I mean, so all I'm gonna say is behind the scenes, they probably have more information than anyone in the public has. So
I mean, you'd think so, but the AD came out and was like, I wasn't made aware that these were rape allegations, and just like being inappropriate in Kansas City until like 2 days before they announced it. So
I mean, I'm
I would like to
curious.
think they know more, but I'm not so confident about that given the statements they put out. So,
And I've got no faith. Like I don't have much faith in them beating Northwestern tonight at home.
no, Boo
And
Boo's gonna cook.
like if you're telling me like Purdue lost Zach Edey, that would change the dynamic of their basketball team. I think it's similar here with Illinois losing Terrence Shannon Jr. But as far as I'm concerned with Indiana, I mean two of the last three games were absolutely painful to go through. I mean, for Indiana
But they won.
somehow dig out of that hole against Morehead State. I mean, wow. Did not see that happening after the way they looked for the first 30 minutes of that game. And then for the Hoosiers to sort of overcome, that's not the right word, but they gave up a crap ton of threes against Kennesaw State. Kennesaw State made them pay. But Indiana sort of hung in there, and you saw Malik Renew possibly taking a step forward. In the last couple games, you're saying, hey, maybe Indiana's three-point shooting has taken another stride. Of course, the Hoosiers had not hit 7 threes in a game all season until the last two. And they made 12 against North Alabama, made 7 against Kennesaw State. And now things get serious with the Nebraska Cornhuskers coming around the corner and the Ohio State Buckeyes there over on Saturday night. Like, Matt, this to me is a tipping point week for this team. And the way I see it, you're going to sit here and say, what are you talking about? You're 10-3. Even if they lose both games, they're 2-2 in Big Ten play. What could you possibly be talking about here in early January? Like, I can't emphasize this enough. This feels like an Indiana team that if they get blown out in these next couple of games, it could get really ugly really fast. I mean, we're talking Romeo Langford season type stuff as it relates to, an extended losing streak. We're talking 12 out of 14, whatever the case is. But I could also see this team doing what they actually did in December, which is you get a big-time home win in Big Ten play, you get a big-time road win in Big Ten play, and all of a sudden, you're talking about a basketball team that potentially could sit at 4-0 in the league with another road quad 1 win and another nice home win to add to the resume. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. This Hoosier team could have a top 4 seed in the conference tournament or a bottom 4 seed in the conference tournament. And when you look at this and say, hey, they're playing a couple games this week that they're supposed to lose, turning the tables over the next 4 or 5 days could really change the outlook for this Hoosier team between now and the end of the year. You and I said this about a month ago. It's probably going to take a 12-8 record in Big Ten play to get into March Madness.
Yep.
And I don't think anyone's
right now.
And I don't think anyone's that confident in Indiana beating Purdue this year. So really, you're talking about 12-6 in the other 18 games. Now you're saying, okay, they're already 2-0, so that's 10-6 in the other 16 games between now and the end of the regular season. And you could tell me IU's going to go in the league. You could tell me Indiana's going to go 15-5 or 5-15. And right now, the Hoosiers don't have like built up trauma of like a 4 or 5 game losing streak. They don't have that kind of baggage weighing them down. And you do sit here and say, if they can find a way to win 1 or 2 games this week, Xavier Johnson's return seems imminent. Okay. He's ramping up his pregame work. For those of you who have gone and been there at Assembly Hall in attendance, he's gone from sitting in a boot on the sideline to going through that shooting work before the game. Khalil Ware obviously had to deal with an illness for the Kennesaw State game. We know how important of a player he is. Matt, I think you can paint any narrative you want for this team. On the bright side, you can say Malik Renew's taking a step forward. Indiana's taking more threes. They should get Johnson and Ware back. The Big Ten is a little weak. On the other side, you can say they narrowly beat Army and Morehead State, and this thing is about to snowball. Is there a side you're taking right now, or do you think this week is what is going to define what the Hoosiers are this year?
I'm not going to say this week will define who they are this year. I will say, however, that the losing at Nebraska will lower this team's ceiling significantly, right? You'll go from maybe this team being able to push for a higher seed in the NCAA tournament, right? If they place top towards the top of the Big Ten and kind of figure things out and get Xavier Johnson back and ramp him up. Remember, you almost beat number 2 Kansas at home without Xavier Johnson, right?
And they were Indiana was the better team in that game outside of the last 5 minutes where, totally lost all the gas in their tank. But
I mean, that's the last 5 minutes matter, but the majority of the game, they outplayed the number 2 team in the country, right? Which you couldn't have said about the Auburn game, and you couldn't have said about the UConn game, right? Where both times they were ran off the court. Again, they played Auburn without who? Xavier Johnson, right? So they haven't been a full complete team. So again, I don't care what the analytics said about this team because the team hasn't been a complete team. Will that mean Xavier Johnson comes back against Nebraska? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But you have to find a way to kind of keep yourself a level head around 500 before he gets back in Big Ten play so that you can kind of then make a push as a complete team towards not only just making NCAA tournament, but making it comfortably. You lose at Nebraska, you're not making it comfortably. And also you've given the Cornhuskers life, which honestly might be beneficial for IU in the long term, because then you'll have one more other team on the schedule that you can play later on this year, I believe, because I think they play in Bloomington later this year. I'm gonna check that real quick while I say that. Yeah, they do. They could help Nebraska scale into a very good victory opportunity come February, but either way, like, they're going to need all the wins that they can get. Again, we've said they need 12-8 in the conference. I honestly, I'm leaning more towards 13 or 14 wins in the conference at this juncture. Again, because there's so many teams that are just bad. Like Maryland's bad, Minnesota's bad. Looking down the list of teams, Penn State and Rutgers are not great.
Indiana's not
Minnesota. Great. I mean, Michigan State's underperforming. Northwestern's, pretty hit or miss. They beat Purdue, but
Michigan stinks. All right. I'm sick and tired of seeing that Michigan team like 20 spots ahead of Indiana in the net and in the analytics. Like, great job, Wolverines, for winning at St. John's. But my God, that team is an absolute dumpster fire. And they're sitting at 62 in the KenPom ratings, while Indiana's 87. And I'm not going to go too much deeper into that. But, like, Michigan stinks, and they're probably like a 6 seed in the Big Ten tournament.
The only reason why they're like high in the analytics is because they blew out a couple of opponents to start the year. They beat St. John's on the road by 16. They beat Youngstown State by like 30.
Right.
And they beat Eastern Michigan, a little bit more recently by 19, right? And IU hasn't been able to put anybody away.
Not even.
But they've won those games where Michigan has losses to McNeese State and Long Beach State.
And Indiana at home.
And Indiana,
who may have forgotten.
Yeah. I'm really sad we don't play Michigan at Assembly Hall this year, because that would be a free and easy W. But irregardless, I do think this schedule actually shakes out for Indiana to do well in the Big Ten. I'm looking at the schedule right now. The toughest stretch, honestly, Nithin, might be these next 6 or 7 games. You go at Nebraska, home OSU, at Rutgers, Minnesota at home, which is the most winnable game, at home against Purdue, at Wisconsin, at Illinois.
Yeah. Those last 3 games are nasty.
That's tough. Whereas you have a stretch where you play Northwestern Nebraska, at Penn State, home against Wisconsin, at Maryland, at Minnesota, finish against MSU. Sure. That's like 7 or 8 wins. This here is, if Indiana ends up going in the next 7 games 3-4, and they're sitting at 5-4 in the league, I'm okay with that, right? It's like, that means, you lose at home against OSU, you lose at the RAC, you beat Minnesota, you beat Nebraska, you lose at home to Purdue, and you win one of the Wisconsin-Illinois games.
Sure. Of course, Wisconsin is beatable. Illinois is not going to have Shannon in all likelihood. I I do think we've seen really good moments from this Indiana team at times this year, right? We know Khalil Ware has that lottery pick upside. We saw Mackenzie Mbako.
Are we sure he's the best player on this team?
Well, Mackenzie Mbako's making a case, except, sure,
I think Malik Renew's
at the start of the
best
Auburn
player.
and the Kennesaw State games, we saw Mbako pouring threes, but then Mike Woodson has the short hook for him because he can't trust him on defense. And then there's Malik Renew, where you sit here and go, well, this dude misses a handful of free throws every so often, but then he's got this 30-point upside, and he's unlocking a three-point shot that he seems to be comfortable in a couple of times a game. And we know what Xavier Johnson looks like when he's good. Gabe Cupps, Trey Galloway. Like, I can see an argument here where Indiana really seizes the bull by the horns this week. Like, I want to be clear, folks. Like, I could see a lot of upside with this team and a lot of downside. You can have any argument you want, and I buy it to a degree because they looked god-awful against Morehead State. I mean, you had a close finish against Kansas at home. And then against Morehead State, you didn't show up.
Yeah, you just they didn't show up, but they're also like,
you keep saying,
they won. That's all that matters. And
except if you're Florida State football, that doesn't.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The good news is there's more than 4 teams that get into the NCAA tournament. Also, they won on short rest against Morehead State. They were tired, and you could see it.
It's true
in that game. So I'm going to, given their response at the last 2 games, and I get Kennesaw State was raining in threes.
They were 50% or 45%, whatever.
That's fine. They still won by 13, and they scored 100 on them. They beat North Alabama by 13, right? No, 23. Sorry,
23. Yeah, the North Alabama game was the sort of the lopsided.
17. I can't do math. 17. Doesn't matter. They beat him by close to 20, 17. Right? That means more to me than them barely beating Morehead State. And honestly, Morehead State is not that bad of a team either. So it's whatever. So I'm going to throw that out as it's just like
the whole this is why I'm saying this week is kind of a judgment week.
Right? But if they win both games, I think they're ranked, Nithin. I think they win both these games. They might be ranked come next Monday.
I'm going to talk about this in a minute. Like, that to me is a perfectly realistic outcome this week. And we'll talk about it in a second. Okay. But here's the thing, Matt. Like, all 14 teams in the Big Ten, believe it or not, are in the top 104 in the KenPom ratings. Unlike the ACC or the SEC or the Pac-12, it seems like this is another year where you don't have 1 or 2 teams really weighing down the conference, believe it or not. You know, that Penn State, Rutgers, they're hovering around that 100 mark as far as national ranking. As you see this Indiana team, what do you think is the biggest thing this team has to do between now and the end of the regular season to make the tournament? Like, what's this team's biggest area for improvement where you say if they can do this, they're gonna make March Madness?
They gotta guard the perimeter better. Like, straight up. They can't let teams shoot 45% from 3.
And take 35 of them, right? Like, that's the thing.
Yeah. They were raining in threes. And that's been a problem against, I mean, look back at IU's losses. You look at the Auburn game, you know, like, again, Auburn shot 29 times from 3 for 48%. All right. You're gonna lose that game 9 out of 10 times. You didn't even give yourself a shot. UConn game. UConn shoots 7 of 22 for 31%, right? They shoot 22 threes, they make 7 of them. That's the difference in the game. Like, they win by 20 and they out rebounded Indiana. You know, like, rebounding and guarding the 3-point line. If you're not going to take a bunch of threes yourself, you got to make sure your opponents don't absolutely bury you from deep. And if that means giving up a couple layups here and there, I'm okay with that. But, you know, like, they just have to quell these runs these teams have gone on where they hit 2 or 3 threes in a row, and then all of a sudden Indiana's, 14-point lead is now 7, or Indiana's 9-point lead is now you're behind.
You're behind, yeah. Well, and what's crazy to me, and I should have seen the perimeter stuff coming, because their perimeter defense has been poor, and it's gonna be a focal point against Nebraska, who takes a ton of threes, coming up on Wednesday night. To me, where I was gonna go with this, I understand basketball is a team game, but I think Mackenzie Mbako can unlock a different level for this Indiana team, because I'm seeing stretches of play where he's turning into a game-changing scorer. Okay, like I'm seeing that stretch of threes he hit at the start of the Auburn game, at the start of the Kennesaw State game. I was in person to see the Hoosiers take on UConn, and I saw Mbako do some good things in that contest, where I was like, hey, look, you know what? If he can shake off some of the rust, if he can shake off some of the youth, he can become a game-changing player for this team. We saw him do some good things against Harvard, even though his toe was on the line a couple of times. If you can get him to understand that defensive philosophy and the system that Mike Woodson brings to the table, 30 minutes of Mackenzie Mbako each game, I think it turns Indiana into a different beast as far as a basketball team between now and the end of the season. He won Big Ten Freshman of the Week. He got into double figures each of the last 3 games. What I noticed is he got 5 or more rebounds each of the last 3 games. Except against Kennesaw State, Mike Woodson had to pull him after 14 minutes because he couldn't guard the arc. So if you can clean up Mackenzie Mbako's defensive lapses, like you were able to clean up Xavier Johnson and his errors with turnovers a couple of years ago, and you were able to unlock a new level with Jalen Hood-Schifino last year, I think Mackenzie Mbako's growth, especially on defense, can push Indiana from the 10th team in the Big Ten to the 3rd or the 4th. I understand they got to defend the arc, and Mackenzie Mbako is going to play a big piece of that. But I'm just sitting here saying, this guy is scoring double figures whether he plays 10 minutes or whether he plays 25. Let's get him to 30. Let's make him one of these second half of the season surge type of players. If you can do that, I think Indiana's going to be cooking with something here. Is this too much emphasis on Mackenzie Mbako, or do you think this is somebody that can, by himself, change the story with Indiana's basketball team this year?
I agree with you. He changes the ceiling. I don't think he single-handedly changes it, though.
You don't think? When he's on, it's beautiful.
Yeah, the team looks on offense like a complete team when he's playing well.
No one cares because of how the game ended. But the first 5-6 minutes against Auburn.
Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to watch. I thought it was be up and down game. I thought he did a shot. I don't see his defense coming around enough.
And I'm not saying he's got to turn into, I'm not saying he's got to turn into, the next Giannis or whoever, at the wing position. Not expecting to turn to OG, right?
Or
I'm expecting him to just make a one step up improvement, right? To where Mike Woodson can trust you to play for 30 minutes a night. Because if that happens, I think the next step is Indiana needs to shorten their rotation, right? I think that's where it gets to. Because if Xavier Johnson comes back and if Mackenzie Mbako can improve, I'm kind of done giving minutes this year to CJ Gunn. I don't think really Anthony Leal is going to do that much for you. I'm not really a big fan of Caleb Banks. I've kind of soured on him since his freshman season. Anthony Walker's deserves some run. Peyton Sparks, obviously, especially if you have a big man down, I think he's someone who can give you some minutes. If you have Renew and Ware, I'm not really sure what kind of role Peyton Sparks plays on this team. Because if you can get Mbako up and running, and of course Xavier Johnson comes back, I think you're really cooking with something. We're going to get to these 2 games coming up this week. Indiana's got a lot of possibilities between now and the next 2 months. And I know all of you who follow us on social media, you're buckled up and ready for this ride. It starts Wednesday night in Nebraska. We're going to preview the Huskers here in just a second. But first, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week. in IU sports, and we usually look beyond a current student athlete at Indiana, and it's going to be Trayce Jackson-Davis, folks. I don't think there's any doubt, any question about this. Yes, OG Anunoby got traded to New York and had a nice game. You're seeing the Hoosiers do some good things in the NFL as well, but Trayce Jackson-Davis logs a career-high 17 points in his first career NBA start. He's completely changed Steve Kerr's mind about who Trayce Jackson-Davis is this season with Golden State. Everyone that took him 57th in the draft, I don't know what you were smoking when you were scouting Trayce Jackson-Davis as an NBA player. So, hey, shout out to TJD. He definitely won the week this past week in IU sports. But, folks, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date by following us on Twitter at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound. Lastly, if you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans, such as yourself. Matt, Indiana plays Nebraska, 9 p.m. Eastern, Wednesday night on Big Ten Network. Kevin Kugler and Sean Morris have the call. The sports books have Nebraska as about a 5-point favorite. An over-under at 151. KenPom has it 79-72 Nebraska. Matt, when you look at this Cornhusker team, they love to take threes. They love to play up and down. They're currently 54th in the KenPom ratings. Rink Mast is a game-time decision. What should Hoosier Nation know about this Nebraska Cornhusker squad?
Well, you think Nebraska basketball, you think bad. They're not bad. They're the first decent Fred Hoiberg team they've honestly had in Nebraska. And they come at you in waves because there's 7 guys on this roster that average more than 6 points. There's actually 4 that average more than 10, including Keisei Tominaga, Rink Mast, Juwan Gary, and Bryce Williams. I believe Bryce Williams is a junior guard. Juwan Gary is also a junior. Keisei's a senior, I think, and Rank Mast is a transfer senior. So they're old. I think, of course, you have CJ Wilcher, who people are familiar with, and then Sam Hoiberg, and Jamarcus Lawrence off the bench for them. This team is interesting to me because I think they can make an NCAA tournament, but I also don't see them ever beating any of the top teams of the Big Ten. So we'll kind of see. They shoot the three decently. They're 32% as a team, but
they'll have to take
everybody in their starting lineup takes threes. Their best 3-point shooter right now, currently by percentage, is Sam Hoiberg.
There you go.
Shout out coach's son mentality. But I mean, their star player is Keisei Tominaga, and he's been working his way back, I believe, from an injury.
He was banged up a little bit this year. Yeah, in fact, they had a few guys kind of banged up, including Rink Mast, who he picked up a knee injury a few weeks ago. This is a 6'9",
and he's a game time experience, game time decision. Yes, experience. Decision. Yes,
like a 6'9" stretch 4. He can play in the post. He can knock down the 3. He's kind of similar to Khalil Ware, except Khalil Ware's got 3-4 more inches in the height department.
5.
And you know, he's obviously someone who's capable of guarding Mast on a one-on-one basis. I'm not sure I want Peyton Sparks to handle that matchup. So Matt and I are going to be paying attention to Khalil Ware's availability coming out of his illness, his bout with COVID. Of course, if it's nowhere, you might end up putting Malik Renew on Mast, and I don't know if you want to occupy Renew with that defensive assignment. You'd rather have him express that offensive freedom and focus on trying to drop another 30 points on the Huskers here. It's fascinating to see this Nebraska team take the step forward. The one thing that really does stick out like a sore thumb from a Nebraska perspective is they had honestly an awful non-conference strength of schedule. Yeah. Cupcakes galore. So you're going to see a lot of cushy stats with Nebraska, or they're shooting a great percentage, or they're not allowing a high percentage. Just realize they have feasted on awful basketball teams this year, with the exception of 2. And those 2 were Creighton and Kansas State. And the interesting thing is Nebraska lost kind of lopsided at home to Creighton. Meanwhile, they went to Kansas State and won. So Kansas State, not nearly the NCAA tournament type team they were last year, but still a team that, you know, has a pulse. And Nebraska went into Manhattan, a tough place to play, won there by 16. Interestingly, sandwiched in between a massive home loss to Creighton and a win at Kansas State, the Huskers had a disastrous loss at Minnesota and a home win over Michigan State when the Spartans were reeling. So Michigan State's kind of turned their season around since then. Nebraska is sort of an enigma in that sense, where their non-conference strength of schedule, according to KenPom, ranks 353rd out of 362 teams. Shout out to universities like South Carolina State, North Dakota, Lindenwood, Florida, A&M, Stony Brook, Duquesne, and Cal State Fullerton for serving as prey to the Cornhuskers. I will say, shout out Duquesne's a solid. So, Cal State Fullerton. But again, on the balance of things, 353rd out of 362. Nebraska takes a ton of threes. They make their free throws. They allow just 44% on 2-pointers. So you think about, okay.
But they've also played nobody.
Who have they played? Not great. And of course, if Rink Mast is unable to go, you really do feel more confident in Malik Renew and Khalil Ware doing damage inside against guys like Jawan Gary. You're not as nervous about that matchup compared to if the tall stature of Rink Mast is in the paint. When it's all said and done, Matt, we don't know if Rink Mast is going to be able to go. We don't know if Xavier Johnson's going to be able to go. We don't know if Khalil Ware is going to be able to go. With all that said, it should be an up-tempo game. You know Nebraska's going to be taking threes. Among the IU players, who do you expect to step up in this game if Indiana is going to pull off the upset?
If they're going to pull off the upset, it's going to be Malik Renew. He's got to continue his offensive spurt, right? He's had like 20 plus the last couple games. And he's got to keep that up. He had 31, career high last game.
Yeah.
And more specifically, not just to keep it up, he's got to hit a couple threes this game. I think he's got to hit maybe 1 or 2. And then IU probably be in a comfortable spot to win this game if he does that.
What I like to hear. From my side, I'm going to be paying attention to Trey Galloway, right? Especially if Xavier Johnson can't go. To me, Trey Galloway is someone who I think you maybe need to lean on in this game for 36 minutes, as long as he stays out of foul trouble, which I'm expecting him to be all right in that category. He's typically good with managing his foul situation. This is a game where I look at Kisei Tominaga and Bryce Williams, and I say, hey, Trey Galloway, you're going to be responsible for one of those 2 defensive assignments all game. Bryce Williams is a really good player, folks. If you haven't heard of him yet, I would definitely recommend hitting up YouTube, finding highlights as far as Bryce is concerned. He's got that Oladipo-ish vibe to his game. I'm not saying that's who he is. I'm just saying there's a long, rangy sort of 2-guard who can play on the wing, who can hit you with drives to the rim and really cause problems on both sides of the court. Trey Galloway, I think, is going to have a major say in if Indiana wins this game or not. And then, if Nebraska does give up a couple of looks from 3, well, I'm going to need Trey Galloway to hit 1 or 2 of them. If Trey Galloway is going to get to the line, I'm going to need him to do better from the free throw line than he has done this season. In transition, Indiana can steal easy points. Well, they can only do that if Trey Galloway ends up making those right decisions on those 3-on-2s, on those 2-on-1s, whether he's setting up his teammates or taking it to the rack himself and either scoring or getting fouled. So I'm going to look at Trey Galloway tomorrow. You got to rely on your old guys in road games and conference play, and that's exactly what Trey Galloway will bring to the table. Curious to see if Mike Woodson leans into Anthony Leal a little bit more. He made comments after Indiana's win against Kennesaw State that Leal deserves a little bit more playing time, especially given that Leal was a critical factor in Indiana's comeback against the Owls. So Leal, who had a good game against Nebraska a couple years ago, he'd be some sort of factor here against the Cornhuskers. We'll see, especially if Xavier Johnson is unable to go. Matt, KenPom has Nebraska winning this game 79-72. Who do you think wins Wednesday night's game and by how much?
I think Nebraska ends up pulling it out because I don't think Xavier Johnson's going to go. And especially if if Khalil Ware is not also available for Indiana, I think Nebraska's gonna have too much outside shooting for IU to win the game. Even though I would like them to, but we'll see how I feel about the Ohio State game because it might be a little bit different.
I'm going to take the Hoosiers. I'm going to take the Hoosiers.
I like the positivity. I'm not even going to argue with it. I like the positivity. I'm not there yet with this game.
I'm even okay with going with the Hoosiers if Rink Mast plays and Xavier Johnson is out and Khalil Ware is out. I think Malik Renew is on the cusp of a next level evolution right in front of our eyes, right? Like we saw the career high performance in Kennesaw State. I'm not going to just ignore that, right? It's hard to score 30 points in a college basketball game. Malik Renew went out and did that. And that's on top of a couple of other impressive performances he put on the table over the course of the last couple of weeks. Kansas had a very tough time defending him. Auburn had a tough time defending him. Michigan had a tough time defending him. And then you saw him really bring out that three-point shot against North Alabama and Kennesaw State. And then I look at Mackenzie Mbaka. And I'm saying, look, man, you got Bryce Williams on this team. You got a Big Ten road game here. It's not easy as a freshman. But if you want to go to the NBA next year, these are the kind of games where Jalen Hood-Schifino stepped up. Can you do the same thing against the Nebraska Cornhuskers when Indiana is a 5-point underdog? Right? I think that's the kind of thing where I like at the end of the day, Mackenzie Mbaka just got to look at himself in the mirror and go, I gotta go. It's time. It's 2024. Let's
new year, new me.
Let's take another stride forward in development because I do think he's improved since the start of the year. Can we unlock a new level? And I just think this Indiana team continues to be underrated.
They're getting better. But are they getting better too slowly?
I think they're underrated. And I look at Nebraska's performance against Creighton, and look at their performance against Minnesota, their non-conference strength of schedule. I'm not putting too much stock into their wins over Michigan State and Kansas State. Nebraska could win this game, make no mistake about it. But I think Indiana's a team that I like. I like Mike Woodson over Fred Hoiberg in the coaching battle too. Like I don't know. I there's something about this Indiana team where like even if they're down by 10 with 6 minutes to go, like I think they're gonna have a bit of a punching fight in them at the end of this game. And if they can make Nebraska a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit nervous, like Indiana's the underdog in this game. In Lincoln, Nebraska.
I just don't think Vegas knows what to do with this Indiana team because there's so many moving variables.
And you know what though? Like even if you take the sports books out of it, I think Nebraska feels like they're the better team than Indiana. And
they have a better record.
And Indiana's gonna go into this game as an underdog. And I want to see them fight with that never-ending relentlessness and that grittiness that they brought to the table against Michigan. And if you ask me, I think actually Nebraska and Michigan have some similarities. So there's a game plan here that I think you can bring over from that game. Fight to the bone like you did in that Michigan game.
I will not argue against of the first 3 games being road games and them both being victories. I will take that every day. Again, college basketball, it is hard to win on the road. It doesn't matter who you are or where you are. It's hard to win on the road in college basketball. And so, again, that's why I'm a little bit I'm a little bit, hesitant about saying that Indiana is going to win this game. But this is a winnable basketball game. 5.5 means 1 or 2 possessions at the end of the game. Can Indiana find a way during this game to, whether it's through rebounding or taking care of the ball, or it's maybe a couple CJ Gunn steal here or there. Maybe he pulls a Michigan again, and we just only play him on road games. Buy yourself 2 or 3 extra possessions more than Nebraska.
There you go.
And that could be the difference in this game.
All I'm saying. I'm taking Indiana straight up in this game. I think this is going to be similar to what you saw against Michigan, and I'm okay with taking Indiana even if the injury news doesn't go their way. If Indiana could get even 5 minutes from Xavier Johnson, it's going to be a
That'll
game
go a long
changer.
way. Yeah.
It is going to be a game changer. And the same deal with Khalil Ware. If Khalil Ware can suit up, even if he's not full strength, and give Indiana 20, 25 minutes in this game on Wednesday night, I think you're going to be in a really, really good spot as far as getting another Big Ten road win and going to 3-0 in league play. We're going to talk about this Ohio State game on Saturday night in just a sec. But first, a quick social media shout out. We're going to give a shout out to our stuff all across the various platforms. You can find us at Indiana HQ, as well as the Hoosier Sound on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Man, on Instagram and at Indiana HQ. But what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
You can find us there. Make sure you follow us if you haven't already. Join the mass as we continue to grow here. We cover IU football, women's basketball, soccer news, baseball, all sorts of different sports. The one-stop shop for Indiana University Athletics. Scott Dolson just joined the NCAA Baseball Selection Committee. In case you weren't aware of that most recent bit of information. One-stop shop. You don't need to follow anybody else. We'll give you the news you need to know over on Indiana HQ, as well as at the Hoosier Sound. On Saturday night, the Hoosiers host the Ohio State Buckeyes, another unranked team. This will be an 8 p.m. Eastern start on prime time on Fox. The students, though, I don't believe will have sort of full representation here. I think there's one more game left as far as holiday break is concerned. KenPom also has Indiana losing this game by a 3-point advantage to the Buckeyes. The Buckeyes are currently 29th in KenPom, 23rd rated offense in the country, 43rd rated defense. They play kind of slow, but they do like to take and make threes. Bruce Thornton, Roddy Gale, Minnesota transfer Jamison Battle, all dangerous scorers, players in Ohio State's starting lineup. Matt, Ohio State hosts Rutgers on Wednesday before Indiana plays Nebraska, so each team will have about the same amount of rest. As far as your read on the Ohio State Buckeyes, what should IU fans know about this team, and what do the Hoosiers have to do to get the win?
Look, Ohio State's actually a very good basketball team. They're not ranked, so if you're just a box score watcher, you're not going to realize they are currently 11-2 with wins over Alabama and UCLA and West Virginia. Their 2 losses have come against a ranked and a very good Texas A&M team, and Penn State, which is still very confusing to me.
It was an awful choke job.
It was an awful choke job. They probably should have won that game. They got lucky with a call there. Or they got unlucky with a call there. It didn't go their way. But Bruce Thornton leads the line for them. He's their leading scorer, their point guard. And honestly, their backcourt runs the show. It's Roddy Gale and Bruce Thornton. They're top two scorers on this team, both averaging above 15 points per game, both shooting above 37% from three. Gale shoots 41 from three. They both average, like, I think close to a steal per game. Good free throw shooters. They have a very familiar face, but a new Buckeye in Jamison Battle, Zed Key, Felix Akpara, and then they just throw a bunch of guys off the bench at you, kind of just to fill in spots. But their starting lineup might compete with any of the other top Big Ten teams as far as, quality. It falls off when it gets to their bench, like Bonner, Middleton, Mahaffey, mid. Right. I don't think they're like Devin Royal, not that great. It doesn't really move the needle in my opinion all that much. But Akpara's former top 4-star, close to 5-star center. Zed Key's been around the block forever. I think this is his 5th year. Jamison Battle, same thing, 5th year in the Big Ten. And then you have your 2-star underclassmen guards and Thornton and Gale as sophomores. This is the best backcourt I think Indiana has faced this year. I think it's better than UConn's at the time of when they played them, especially since they played them without Castle.
Yep.
And I think it's better than Kansas's. And I think they might have the best backcourt in the league. So this is going to be a really big test for the guards, especially if Xavier Johnson can't go if he can't go, I don't know who guards Bruce Thornton. He's gonna destroy us. But they run some of the best offense in the league. They're very suspect on defense, especially if you get Akpara into foul trouble. I mean, they don't really have anybody over 6'8" off the bench. So, you get Clay Ware back for this game, hopefully. He should feast because there's nobody within 4 inches of him. Really, and so should Malik Renew, honestly. So this will be a clash of styles. I don't like Indiana in this matchup because again, college basketball is a guards game. And Indiana's guards, again, especially if Xavier Johnson's not able to go, don't really match up that well.
Oops. I think I may have lost you for a sec. You're gonna have to just keep going here without me. I'm not sure why my audio freaking out here. Oh, I think now we're back.
All right, good.
All right, it's a little 1 or 2 second blip there. No, I totally agree with your read as far as this game is concerned. You mentioned the piece about foul trouble. The interesting thing is that might be the one angle Indiana has in this game because the Hoosiers have done a good job drawing fouls and avoiding fouls on both ends of the court. Now, can they make their free throws? That's a different conversation. But even if they don't, I think you have that extra piece of the puzzle where even if Indiana misses their free throws, you put key players from Ohio State's starting lineup onto their bench, and they're forced to be sidelined, and they're not able to play, and that might open up a few things for the Hoosiers. Matt, this to me feels like an Assembly Hall special, right? Saturday night, prime time, Fox. If this game is a noon start on a Sunday afternoon, or if it's a 7 p.m. start on a Wednesday, I am regretting everything, right? Like if you flip the games on the schedule and you say Ohio State goes to Indiana Wednesday night at 7 o'clock or 9 o'clock East, like on a Wednesday night, and then Indiana has to go to Nebraska on a Saturday night, I'm saying 0-2, right? Instead, it's the Hoosiers who get the road trip to Lincoln midweek, and now they return to Bloomington. The fan base is going to be lubricated over the course of the day.
That is a vocabulary word.
And they're going to be rocking and rolling and ready to go at Assembly Hall. And hopefully Indiana's crowd and environment can convince the refs to make a couple of calls in Indiana's favor and give the Hoosiers a little bit of an extra advantage in that department. Because I do see the potential for IU to take advantage if Ohio State does get into that foul trouble. I'm also like a little surprised that the Buckeyes kind of play as slow as they do. Like I would think with their guards, with the way they like to get up and down the floor, I would think they would like to get up and down the floor, but they really don't. You go back and you look at that UCLA game, 67-60. You go and you look at the West Virginia game they just played. Yeah, it was an overtime contest, 78-75. Right? It's just they haven't really, Texas A&M was slow, bogged down. Obviously, that was the first week of the season, but again, more recently, UCLA, West Virginia, like they're not lighting it up, and I thought they would, given their guard play, given how effective of a scorer Jamison Battle is. Guess that's not what Chris Holtmann wants his team to do right now. So you may see Mike Woodson just kind of drag Ohio State into the mud here and play something like a 68-66 kind of game. I'm curious to hear what you have to say here, Matt. Of course, the Buckeyes come into this game. We'll see what happens on Wednesday, but it looks like they're going to be generally healthy coming into this game. Of course, we keep talking about Xavier Johnson and Khalil Ware's injury status. When you see this matchup, Matt, KenPom has it 75-72, Ohio State. Who do you think wins this game and by how much?
I think it's about right. I think 72-70, probably more like it. I think I was just gonna have too much on the perimeter for the Hoosiers. It's just they're too experienced for this Indiana team right now. I think this Indiana team catches them in March, in the Big Ten tournament. This game might be a little bit more winnable, but not this case. So yeah, don't think the Hoosiers win either game this week. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's that's fine. It's Big Ten. You're going to drop games. You go back to 2-2 in the conference. You reset and go next week, where you have, I think, 2 very winnable games next week. So, as much as I would like Indiana to go 2-0 here, I mean, I don't really see it being feasible.
I do.
This is why we have a podcast. If we agreed on everything, we wouldn't have a podcast.
I do. Look, and don't get me wrong, okay? Ohio State, if they played Indiana 100 times, they would probably win more often than they would lose. But this, to me, this is a gift from the Big Ten gods, right? Putting this game in Assembly Hall with Gus Johnson in the building in all likelihood, and Jim Jackson, getting that Fox broadcast, and it's a Saturday night, and, especially if Indiana beats Nebraska on Wednesday, you might see a little bit more juice in the Indiana Hoosier fan base. This Ohio State team, like, they're a great squad when it comes to their performances at home. But, like, I watched the entire game that they played at Penn State. And they were great for stretches there. But I think there's a little bit of a mentality thing that does lack for Ohio State if you really drag them into a fight for 40 minutes. That's what A&M did in Columbus. That's what Penn State did in Happy Valley. And I think that's what Mike Woodson's plan is going to be. What I will say, folks, is like is that KenPom has this game. It's 75-72. There is no chance that there are 147 points scored in this game. I think this is going to be 61-59. Indiana wins. Mike Woodson defensive masterclass. Hold the Buckeyes under 60. I don't know. I said this earlier. I think Indiana's underrated. I think you have 2 opportunities here to take IU as underdogs. I regret everything. But at the same time, like, I'm going to do something that I guess is out of left field. I'm going to give Indiana credit for winning games.
Yeah,
and, like, I think
out of left field, that one.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess Net and the KenPom disagree with me. But, Nebraska's winning game story is different than Indiana's, because Nebraska's story as far as winning games is concerned is against the worst non-conference strength of schedule in the country. Indiana has a middling non-conference strength of schedule, okay? And I guess we, like, ignore them going into Michigan and looking good for 40 minutes and winning a game. And I don't know if Xavier Johnson can play a little bit and if Khalil Ware can play a little bit. I'm feeling the Hoosiers. And in my world, they're 4-0 in Big Ten play when we go to bed on Saturday night.
That would be wonderful. I like your version of events. I'm just saying, I like being right. So,
by the way, folks, we asked you over on our weekly podcast poll at the Hoosier Sound, and you can find us there over on Twitter. KenPom gives Indiana a 28. Kentucky. I think KenPom was built in Kentucky, given how weird, I think off base it is right now. I took Indiana straight up at Michigan, and I don't know. It was crazy to me that Michigan was a 6-point favorite in that game. KenPom gives Indiana a 28% chance of beating Nebraska and a 37% chance of beating Ohio State. What do you think will be Indiana's record this week? I asked all of you. And Matt, believe it or not, 57% of the respondents say Indiana is going to win both games this week. 9% of respondents say Indiana is going to lose both. 23% say the Hoosiers will split with the loss to Nebraska. 12% say the Hoosiers.
We had too many homers to listen to our podcast.
Loss.
Too many homers
to Ohio State. I don't know, Matt.
Y'all are homers. You hear that? Homers, all of you. The lot.
I don't know. I think we got people.
You've been listening to Nithin too much.
Watch the games. Trust Mike Woodson.
I trust Mike Woodson to get us right. I just don't think this is the week we're gonna get right, especially if we're without Khalil Ware tomorrow and Xavier Johnson's not back.
We'll see. Man, as we wrap up here on this Tuesday night, any final thoughts? Indiana's men's basketball team gets out of non-conference without a bad loss. They are 2-0 in Big Ten play. Lots to decide here this upcoming week. Anything else on your mind here as we close up here in early January?
I lost my fantasy championship to my younger brother, so please thoughts and prayers, because he's never gonna let me live that down. Especially since this is, of course, the year that we start playing for money, and all the last 3 years that I won, we weren't playing for money. So, kill me, please. What else? College football playoff was fantastic yesterday. Two of the best college football games I think I've watched in a long time. Now we get to root for Penix in the final. Basketball should hopefully be just as fun this week. And hopefully just as positive for the Indiana Hoosiers as it was yesterday. So go Hoosiers.
Speaking of which, I'm optimistic about the men's basketball team this week. Looking forward to seeing both games here coming up. I don't think Indiana football is that far away from making the college football playoff.
I agree with you. I don't think they're that far.
I don't think I don't think it's that far off. I'm not saying it's happening in 24, but next 10 years, I think it's
5.
I think it's a reasonable thought as far as in a 12-team college football playoff world. Indiana kind of does a few easily transformable things to get into the playoff. Washington was an abomination as far as a football program 2, 3, 4 years ago. Same thing with Kansas. Same thing with Arizona, right? You have against Arizona, they turn things around and beat Oklahoma, okay, to New Year's Six Bowl. It's not that far away. That's just something that crossed my mind last night. I was watching both of those games. But folks, that about wraps it up for our 319th show of the Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your support. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at the Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.
Peace and love. Go Hoosiers.